I don't like it. It makes me uncomfortable or it makes me laugh because I'm feeling awkward. I don't know, guys. I don't know. I hate to dunk on a book, but I'm gonna dunk on this one because I didn't like it. I'm so glad that I read this book. It was weird. They were weird. Hi, hello, welcome to my channel and to a wrap-up video. Welcome back. So excited that you're here, and I'm so excited to talk about these books because this was a really good reading month for me. I was able to read 11 books this month, which for me is really good. I try not to put a lot of pressure on myself to like read all the time. I just don't want to end up resenting something that I love doing so much, and I think that that can sometimes be an unfortunate side effect of forcing yourself to do something just because you're like in a weird random race with people online or people you know or whatever. So I did have a really good reading month in November. I'm so excited to talk to you about these books. There's a very weird assortment. As you'll see, I really just let my whims select the books for me mostly, and Libby, and then there were a couple of books in there that I assigned to myself because I'm doing like that series of reading vlogs for different books. Without further ado, let's talk about the 11 books that I read this month. Full disclosure, I am one of those readers that for a lot of what I read, I forget almost immediately. It's not that I forget everything that I read, it's mostly that I just, every book that I read, or most books that I read, I leave them with one like core memory from it, essentially is what I'm gonna say. And I probably couldn't give you a full plot breakdown unless I was very intentional about taking notes, which I kind of have been doing anyway. But just know that going into my wrap-ups and reviews and stuff. Okay, so starting off, we started kind of weak this month. I was listening to A Conjuring of Light, which is the third book in the series by V.E. Schwab, The Shades of Magic. I had been listening to that for a while. I was listening to it using like the Spotify hours, and then I lost access, so I had like an hour or something left going into November. I thought the audiobook narrators did a really good job. I don't think that this was the fault, because a lot of times when I'm listening to audiobooks, and we'll get to a couple in there that like I do think part of why I didn't enjoy it was the audiobook reader. This one specifically, the audiobook narrators were really good, and I know that they were really good because when I listened to all three books. When I read the second one and the first one, I liked those both more than this one. I think this one was just a lot longer than it needed to be. I didn't enjoy it. I wasn't pulled to continue reading it. It kind of felt like pulling teeth towards the end. I think it's just because it felt like things were just happening for the hell of it, or just because they like needed to happen, and it didn't feel as organic as like other books in the series. I read the second one earlier this year. I think I even read the first one this year, possibly. I don't remember, but I definitely read the second one very recently, like before reading the third one. I loved that one. I mean, there was like a tournament in there that was super exciting. I think it's also like my priorities with reading any book is usually characters. I'm willing to forego a lot if I like the characters in any novel, because as a reader and even as a writer, not like the characters are what's most important to me. And if I fall in love with the characters, then I'm gonna fall in love with the book a lot of times. When I say fall in love with the characters, just to be clear, they don't have to be good. Like, my favorite characters on Yellow Jackets at this point in time are Misty and Walter and Lottie. If you know anything about Yellow Jackets, you know they're the most insane ones there. Okay, but I love me a complex character. I love me a character that makes sense but also is contradictory, because that's how people are in real life. I don't like to DNF very often, but I'll do it if I'm really struggling. I think the reason that I didn't DNF this one was because I'd already grown attached to the characters. So I liked the characters enough to continue it, but I didn't really enjoy it very much. I felt also like it was all over the place, and this might have been a result of listening. Story-wise, I felt when I was listening to it, it seemed to just be jumping from perspective to perspective and thing happening to thing happening, and it was just this big puzzle that was really overwhelming for me as a reader. I know a lot of people love these books. I'm not saying that they're bad. I just think that they weren't entirely for me. The second one I really loved though. I will put that out there. I loved the second one. Then I went into a little bit into my reading vlog era. And that's when I picked up Letters to a Young Poet by Rainer Maria Rilke. This is essentially a compilation of 10 letters, like obviously letters to a young poet, but this guy who was kind of a poet, he liked writing poetry and whatever, sent letters to Rilke and Rilke answered them, which is so cool. Like, why don't we make them like this anymore? Like, I guess your favorite author tweets you back or something. I don't know. Lighting is gonna be crazy, by the way. Forgive me. I'm not gonna go into these too much because I did do a whole reading vlog for them, but that was that. I love this one. It's very simple, straightforward, and made me feel good about myself after. In the sense of like, it made me feel better about the world, and I'm always looking for things that make me feel better about the world. And the next one that I read was Phantom of the Opera. This was also part of my reading vlog. I really loved this. I want to reread it at some point in the future because I think it's just like so well done. This is following a bunch of characters that are working in managing the opera house in France, in Paris, France. They're plagued by the opera ghost. I'm not gonna say anything more than that, but I really love this. I read All Fours by Miranda July. Let me get my notes out for this one, guys. So as you can see, the notebook is out. Oh, also for Conjuring of Light, I wrote here, I remember almost nothing, was not great in my opinion. All Fours by Miranda July. This was a weird one. This was a weird one. And I know that it was meant to be weird. So I don't want anyone coming at me saying, you're not getting the point. I get it. I get it. I think I'm just not a very spicy reader. I don't like it. It makes me uncomfortable or it makes me laugh because I'm feeling awkward. When I listened to Bride by Ali Hazelwood, I was uncomfortable and I was laughing out loud by myself. Okay. So yeah, this was very odd. I know what it was trying to do, and I put in my review on Fable that like, I get it. I get that it's trying to be weird. I get that it's working with sexuality and sex and aging and womanhood and what does it mean to be a mother and what does it mean to traverse grief. Also, I think that the like, even though the sexual stuff made me uncomfortable, it was done well. I get it. The writing was alluring even, I will say. I just felt like it was too much. You know, I think there's a very fine line between too much and then not doing it all, or like not taking your work or your novel to the extent that it needs to go. I felt like it was too much, but that's just me. There were some scenes there that were just, let me tell you, one thing about this book, I'm never gonna forget it because it was weird. They were weird. I don't even want to talk about the scene that is literally coming to my mind, but if you've read it, and if you haven't, I don't know if I would say read it. I don't know. Like, if you're interested in, so here's the thing. Let's say it this way. It's not smutty, right? It's not spicy. It's not like a romance novel. It's not there. The sexual scenes that are written in it are not there to like incite any type of feeling from the reader in the sense of like, ooh, la la, blah, 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 right? It's there for a purpose, and I get it. I think that some of it felt a little superfluous. I get it. I know the whole time I'm talking about All Fours, I'm saying I get it because I do. I just felt uncomfortable. One thing I did write down here too was a lot of the time I just kept thinking, so what? Like things were happening throughout this novel and throughout the narrative, and I just kept thinking, so what? But that was another thing. It just kind of felt like, why are we here? I wanted to know why we were here, why we were doing the things that we were doing, and I didn't feel like we knew for a big portion of the novel. Towards the end, it started wrapping up much better towards the end. The other note that I did make is that there is a part where the narrator asks her friends what they like about menopause. And I found that really profound. Like, I feel like that was the core of the novel to me. As the reader that I was, that was what I paid attention to the most, and one of the things that I was leaving the novel with. Again, this was about like womanhood and aging and the, you know, pressures of being a woman and a wife and a mother and all of that. Menopause and menstruation, whatever, it is part of that process of like childbirth and fertility and whatever. When we got to that part, I was like, okay, so here it is. This is like the point. And I thought that it was really well done. And the responses kind of made me feel a little emotional. I thought that was really profound because you spend your whole life as like a woman thinking like, oh my God, I have a timer and the timer is running out. And then you read things like this and you're like, it's not running out. I have time and I'm here and I'm present and it's okay. I don't have to be beautiful all the time, and I don't have to be young all the time, and I don't have to have energy all the time, and I don't have to be excited about things that everyone expects me to be excited about. Blah, blah, blah. I think I would recommend this to people who are interested in this kind of stuff and wouldn't be like uncomfortable. Other than that, I would say like I wouldn't reread this book. Let's just put it this way. It's like I don't regret reading it, but I wouldn't reread it. So that was All Fours by Miranda July, and then I started taking notes on my iPad. So here we go. We go back to the iPad. Okay. And then I read Good Material by Dolly Alderton. This was my first novel that I read by her. I really enjoyed this. I thought the narrator did a really good job. The number one thing I remember about this book, which I read like earlier this one, so don't hold me to it. The number one thing I remember about this book is that it's from the perspective of a guy, and he's post-breakup, and he's just like, what do I do with myself? Oh my God, why did my relationship fall apart? It isn't until the end where you get the perspective of the girl, and you spend the entire like 80%, 90% of the novel in this guy's head. He's very self-victimizing. He's very like confused. He's not a bad guy by any means, but he's like whiny, a little too like self-involved. As I was reading this book, I picked up on that very quickly. I was like, you're annoying. Like this man was annoying to me, but I thought it was so well done. It made sense to me. Like he was a full person, and I liked that about this novel. And I also really like that we don't get the quote unquote reveal of the girl's perspective until the end. So for a lot of readers who maybe didn't view him the same way I did, like it depends on the type of reader you are, the experiences that you have, what you're bringing to the novel, right? Any novel you read, you're bringing your own experiences to it. And I felt like it was a really fun reversal of, okay, we've been hearing his perspective, we've been literally hearing his ideas, and now we get to see what she thought about the relationship and why she ended it and why she didn't want to do it anymore. Really good. I know a lot of people like Dolly Alderton, and I know she has that other book, Everything I Know About Love. I want to read other stuff by her. So that was Good Material by Dolly Alderton. I had a good time. And then back to the reading vlog. So I finished White Nights by Fyodor Dostoyevsky. This actually has 2 short stories in it. They were okay. They were nothing profound, so it wasn't... One of them is kind of a romance, and the other one kind of felt just vibey. I talked a lot about this in my wrap-up, so I'm just gonna kind of leave it at that. White Nights. All right. Then I listened to Bright Young Women by Jessica Knoll. This is a thriller / historical fiction / like murder trial situation. I didn't know that much about it actually. I was watching someone I follow, they were talking about it, and it turns out it's actually based on the Ted Bundy story, which I'm actually not that familiar with. It's based on that. A lot of the victims are based on real people. One of them, Kimberly, has the name of the actual victim. I didn't know all this. Even not knowing this, I did feel a little bit uncomfortable, like icky listening to this story. I don't know. I just felt like, well, it was a horrible story. I felt ickier after finding out that it's based on a real situation. There is that line of like, are you profiting from the horror of other people's lives? Are you treating it with respect? Are you, all of that after I read it too, it just made me feel a little bit ickier about the novel. It wasn't badly written. It's not a bad novel by any means. I was most interested in Ruth. I loved Ruth. I wanted to hear more of her story. My review on Fable was literally like, I want a book on Ruth. Yeah, it was good. It didn't, I think for true crime for now, unless I find something that's really good, I'm gonna just stick to my podcasts. Yeah. I'm just gonna leave it at that, especially because it's like based off of real people, and I don't know how much is real and how much is fictional. I don't want to talk about it that much. Okay, so then we have Assistant to the Villain. I didn't love this one. Let me take out my notes. Everything felt forced. I didn't believe anything about the relationship between these people. Was not convinced. It felt very insta-lovey, and it felt very like, you're hot, I'm hot, let's bang. The villain wasn't even a villain. He was just a quote-unquote bad guy. they didn't do anything on the page together. Like, I think what was so frustrating about this novel was that, like, the title makes you think like, oh, okay, she's gonna be on missions with him and like killing people with him and like doing all that. She just had a desk job and like occasionally would find a dismembered head in the office, mansion, whatever. I don't know what I expected going into this, but it wasn't this. I know a lot of people like it, and I think that if you're a reader that brings the backstory knowledge to this novel and you apply it to the novel, you'll enjoy it because you're going to have bits and pieces where you can fill it in with your own ideas. I just felt like this was not super fleshed out, and it was simultaneously too long and not long enough. It didn't feel complete to me. It didn't feel as thought out as it could have been. I'm really interested low-key to see what the second book is about, because I heard recently the second book came out. I would be very curious to know like what that's all about, if it got better than this one, because I feel like the bones are there, it just wasn't fleshed out enough. 3 books left. Plus one that I'm going to tell you guys about because I'm almost done with it. So the next book that I read was Intermezzo by Sally Rooney. The only other Sally Rooney book that I read was Normal People back in like 2022. And I thought it was good. I enjoyed it. I wasn't really interested in reading Beautiful World, Where Are You, and Conversations with Friends, because when I read the summaries of those, I just didn't find it very interesting. But when I heard about this one, about how it deals with 2 siblings, 2 brothers specifically, grief, loss, family dynamics, just different relationship dynamics, I was really interested to like maneuver away from the sun at this point. But anyway, so I was really excited to read this, and I put a hold on it as soon as I heard about it. I'm so glad that I read this book, because this is probably one of my favorites of the year that I've read so far. So basically we have 2 brothers, Peter and Ivan. Peter's the older brother, Ivan's the younger brother. They have just lost their father due to cancer, and they're kind of navigating that. We kind of shift in different chapters between their 2 perspectives. So you have Peter's perspective where he's a lawyer, he's kind of like going around whatever, and then you have Ivan's perspective where he does like freelance work, and he also does chess competitions. There's so much going on, I don't know where to start. So a few notes that I wrote. I just love what she did on a writing level as well as on a narrative level. Peter's perspective is written in very short sentences, very like, you can feel kind of the panic and the inner turmoil that he's going through. Whereas Ivan's has like commas and periods and whatever. It's very like much more flowy. Peter is much older than Ivan is. I think they have like a 10-year age gap between the 2 of them. And you're kind of just following each of them, how they interact with each other as well as how they interact with different people. So Ivan, he goes to a chess competition and he meets Margaret, who is like 36 years oldish, older than her brother by a year or 2. You have Peter, who he has a childhood best friend / ex-girlfriend, as well as a current girlfriend, now Naomi. So there's Sylvia, and then there's Naomi, who is like his current girlfriend. She's much younger. She's actually around Ivan's age. What do I say about this book? It was so good. The way that she traverses grief in this novel, and the way that she so subtly shows you through their actions and their thoughts and their interactions with each other, how they're dealing with the grief. Writing is confusing, and I know that this is like a common sentiment with Rooney novels because she doesn't use like quotation marks. And something that was really fascinating with this one that I noticed was that there were even times when, especially for Peter, but also for Ivan, but mostly for Peter, you would be reading like lines and lines, and it was unclear what parts of those were dialogue and what parts of those were things he was thinking that he wanted to say. Someone would say something to him. Sometimes it wasn't clear, like, is he saying this out loud or is he not? I'd have to reread the part to like kind of guess for myself. You'd also have to guess based off of the other person's response. So if he was to say something like that and the other person's response had nothing to do with that or didn't acknowledge it, my guess was that he wasn't saying these things out loud. It was confusing, but I think that it adds to the novel, at least in this one specifically that I was reading, because grief and loss and relationships with your siblings and relationships with your family and relationships with people you're dating, they are confusing. And I think that the writing style worked well because of that reason. The other thing that I wrote down as I was reading, which is really fun taking notes like while I'm reading actually, the writing style feels very muffled. So it almost feels like putting your ear to a door and trying to listen through to hear what's going on. And I love that because it creates a sense of distance between you and the book in some ways, even though you also feel very intimate with the characters, right? Because when you're reading a book, I think from the outset, a lot of times you feel this like intimate connection with these characters because you're seeing so much of them. But with this one, there was a little bit of distance there that I thought worked so well. The other thing that I wrote is that Peter's perspective, some of the writing was giving Yoda. I wish I wrote down a couple lines, but like literally I was reading some sentences and I was like, Yoda is speaking currently. It's fair to point out that this is not a writing style that's going to work for everyone. It takes a lot of getting used to, but I think the payoff is worth it in the end. I also do think in some ways this could have been a little bit shorter. The book could have been a tiny bit shorter or like a little bit more concise, but I don't mind a longer book, so it was fine. I love the way she so beautifully portrays how easily people switch into fights. Two specific scenes where the characters in them, they go from like just being kind of normal to suddenly getting into a fight and getting into disagreement. And as I was reading this, I was enjoying it so because I was like, that's exactly how it happens in real life. Like you'll be talking about something normally with like your friends or your siblings. I have 3 brothers, so your siblings or your family or your friends or your loved ones, and it just, something tilts at just the right moment and then it's in a fight. And the one I will say is the one I'll point out specifically, Peter and Ivan, they go out to dinner, and that whole entire scene, I was like, this is perfect. I was like, this is such a good depiction of like sibling relationships. I have 3 brothers. I think I should be able to speak on that, but I thought it was so well done. I honestly, this was such a delight. I'm going to buy a copy when I go to England. I'm waiting to go to England because I don't know if I haven't seen the blue covers here in the US, but I have seen them in England. I'm gonna get myself a blue cover copy from England when I go. That is on my bucket list because I want to reread this book at some point. I have to. The thing that I also pointed out is that the characters are just very unbound. They're very realistic because they do things that are contradictory. They'll say something and then do something different. And I think something that a lot of writers and authors that I've like read, and even I've done myself on occasion, is that you think that because you are like setting up a character to be X person, you have to make sure that they're constantly and consistently that X person. And what you realize over time, as you read more and you write more and you live more, you realize that like people are not just the labels that you have put on them and the things that they even say that they are so much more than that, and they contradict themselves and they lie without realizing they're lying, or they're dishonest without realizing they're dishonest. And she did a really good job with that in this one too. I mean, I loved all the characters. I think there is not a single character in this book that I disliked. I read on one of the reviews when I was like looking at the reviews for this on Goodreads, people said they hated Ivan and they loved Peter. And I felt the opposite. Like I loved both of them. But I really did love Ivan. I don't know why. I think it's because I have 3 younger brothers. That's probably why. But it was so funny too because the comment was like, as an eldest child, and I'm also an eldest child, but I loved Ivan. Anyway, that was Intermezzo by Sally Rooney. Thank you, Sally Rooney. You did it again. I say that like I've read all of her books, but you did it. This was amazing. So 2 more books that we're going to talk about. So the next book that we're going to talk about is Blue Sisters by Coco mellors. And I'm just going to put really briefly what I put as my immediate reaction review. This was just Little Women, but they all have problems. You know what point I came to this conclusion? I was listening to this while I was playing Stardew Valley. Towards the end, one of the sisters, she like gets into it with like, she's like, oh, I really like this guy, blah blah blah, and she like wants to like be with him, and the guy is like, I'm too old for you. And I was like, hey Joe. Hi Joe, what are you doing here? I literally was like, that's Joe and the German professor. That's pretty much, yeah. What was really interesting was that I read this book right after, or like right alongside reading Intermezzo, and they are both books about sibling relationships. They're both books about grief. In Intermezzo, they lose their father. In Blue Sisters, they've lost their sister. And I mean, between the two of those, Intermezzo wins. Read Intermezzo if you have to read one only. But yeah, Blue Sisters was literally just Little Women, but they're all screwed up and they have problems. Deals with like addiction, deals with complicated family relationships, really. I thought it was well done. I didn't hate it. I have a couple of friends who were like, what? You didn't like it as much? I thought it was okay. Coming out of reading Intermezzo and then reading this one, I think I was more attuned to what a really good grief sibling relationship book could look like. Besides that, it didn't hold up. You know what I mean? I liked Blue Sisters more than Cleopatra and Frankenstein. So worth giving a shot. That's not to say like, oh, it's so bad, whatever. There were much worse books on this list than Blue Sisters, okay? Finally, I finished this last night. I was listening to it on audiobook. The Bird King by G. Willow Wilson. I did not know a single thing about this book. I did not know a single thing about this author. And when I first started listening to it, I was like, I understand what the book was trying to do. So I think this was a historical fiction based off of, you know, let me actually just pull up the Goodreads because I don't want to give you bad information. It's set in 1491 during the reign of the last sultanate in the Iberian Peninsula. Okay, it follows this girl, her name is Fatima, and this boy, his name is Hassan. They are living in the sultan's castle. Fatima is a concubine, Hassan is a map maker, and they're besties for the resties. I didn't like this. I wanted to. Part of it is that the narrator just didn't do a good job. I did not like what the narrator was doing. I think I didn't DNF it. I continued to read it because it was really interesting to see like where it was going. I was just curious because I was like, what's happening here? Don't know anything about the author. Don't know anything about the backstory of like why this was written. Didn't like it. I think the whole time I was listening to this, I was thinking to myself, just read City of Brass. Or just read Ember in the Ashes. Like, what are we doing here? Felt like there was nothing new being brought to the overall genre or like this like little niche of Muslim fiction, historical fiction, dealing with jinns and stuff. I just didn't think that it was doing anything profound. In the novel itself, like in the narrative, it was very very unconvincing. Like, Fatima is a concubine in the sultan's harem or whatever, and everyone is treating her like they're all besties for the resties, and I was like, you're not giving me any context for why. She's literally like, in the same breath that they're calling her a slave, they're like being friends with her and letting her be disrespectful, which, not that I wanted them to mistreat her, but when you refer to someone as a slave, there are certain things you're like expecting, and it's not that. Like, it's not her being able to say whatever she wants to the sultan, and then they're just like hee hee ha ha, but you're a friend, like you're our friend. maybe I don't have the historical context, enough of the historical knowledge for this one, like to judge it in that way. I just didn't like this one. Even plot wise, it just felt like we were just dragging on and doing nothing. So pause for spoilers if you want to leave. If you want to read this book. Pause. Okay. The whole time they're running away from the inquisitors and whatever, the entire time they're just running away. Like nothing is going on. I was just like, are we gonna do stuff? Like, are we gonna... It was just, no. I don't know, guys. I don't know. I hate to dunk on a book, but I'm gonna dunk on this one because I didn't like it. So the last book I'm gonna talk about, because I'm pretty much almost done, I have like an hour or two left, is Regrettably, I'm About to Cause Trouble by Amie mcnee. This is such a fun little book. I'm having so much fun with this one. It's basically about this girl who's like prim and proper, and she has a mark on the inside of her thigh that makes people think like, oh, she's a witch and whatever. And her family tries to marry her off to this like nobleman guy, hoping that she'll have babies and be settled down. And the story goes off from there. I'm really enjoying it so far. Hopefully the ending isn't bad. I don't foresee it being bad. 12 is nice. I'm happy with my reading amount. I don't know what's gonna happen in December because I'm traveling, and then I also have like grading and stuff to fully finish up before the end of the semester, but we'll see. Been getting a lot of holds in from the library, so I'm really excited about that. Before you go, if you're feeling so inclined, let me know a book or two that you read this month that you really enjoyed. Hopefully I'll catch you in another video very soon. Thank you for watching. Thank you for your comments. Yeah, it's been really... I say this every single time, but yeah, seriously, thank you. Goodbye.